What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Paddlin' Thin Network. Bringing a video to you, I'm Brian Schiller, one of the hosts of the OG shows, and today I'm going to run you through my top 5 baits from 2019. I'm going to break this down kind of by season as my season went. Obviously, some of these baits I don't necessarily use all season. However, I think all my 5 you could pretty much use all season. So I'm going to kick this one off with the good old Texas Rig Senko. Beginning of the year, especially first tournament of the year out there in Big Hill, Kansas, this black blue Senko saved my day. During pre-fishing, I was on a jig bite, but when that jig bite wasn't working, I'd switch over to a black blue Texas Rig Senko, just work it slowly, fish would grab it. This is a good bait in summer as well. I mean, you can't go wrong with a Senko, right? Everybody fishes them. Everybody likes to say a Senko is like cheating, but my 2 favorite, or I'll say 3 favorite colors in the Senko is black blue flake, green pumpkin, and green pumpkin red flake. I'm going to end up putting up a video for those that don't know how to fish a Texas Rig Senko, go in a little bit more detail on this specific bait at a later date and time. Bait number 4, the old chatterbait. I'm like Brad Hicks, if you guys saw his video. If not, go back and check it out. But I like fishing the Project Z's. And I also like fishing the Picasso style chatterbait, or vibrating jig, whatever you want to call it. Trailers are a good thing. I like fishing a bait style trailer. I do fish a crawfish trailer sometimes, like Brad Hicks had mentioned, but one trailer that I found this year, I believe I was down in Tennessee at the KBF FLW Open, and I found this bait at the tackle shop, and lo and behold, I was camping out right next door to Gary Yamamoto. But this is their Zacko kind of swim bait. It's kind of got that flat back. It doesn't have a paddle tail like a Kayak does. I like using Kayaks, don't get me wrong. But in springtime, when the fish were on beds, I had a lot of great success on these baits. I don't know if it was, I think it had a lot to do with the way that this tail kind of flaps behind that. Don't get me wrong, you're going to get that movement out of a paddle tail, but it's not as aggressive as what a paddle tail is. My 2 favorite colors in the chatterbait, black blue and straight white. Once in a while I'll throw in a green pumpkin. You know, if I'm fishing some perchy type waters, I'll throw this shad style as well. Bait number 3. And this is kind of a culmination of baits, right? Everybody is hot on the whole Ned rig style of fishing. I love using these Ned locks. They hold the bait. I do use a little bit dab of super glue behind the head to keep that bait on there. But I found this, going into, I think it was late spring, early summer, Z-Man came out with the Ticklers. So this is kind of like the Ned, it's kind of a cross between a Ned rig and a small tube bait. It's got that, skirt on the back, so to speak, and I'll do some close-ups of these. But that action on that tail is really lifelike, and I really enjoyed it. I do switch back and forth between the Ticklers and the actual Ned style baits, but along with that as well is the TRD craws. These things are money. That's the beauty of a Ned rig, I believe, is there's so many different baits that Z-Man has come out with, and not only Z-Man but other companies. I am a firm believer in that ElasTech does make the difference. You know, that plastic floats, it gives that bait a different action compared to your traditional plastic. You know, with all these baits in the TRD craws, I mainly use 3 colors: California craw, black blue flake, and green pumpkin. In the Ticklers, I love black blue flake, sprayed grass, which is like a watermelon candy, green pumpkin, and then I know Ricketts dropped it on the Secret Santa episode in a color that cashed a check and did really well for me this year, was New Money. And that was up on Madison Chain. I forget how many inches of smallmouth I caught on that bait, but you know, I caught some quality fish. I think I had, you know, a 19 and a half, but you know, throughout the country, wherever I fished this year, if the water was really clear, I went to that New Money or sprayed grass. If the water was a little dirty, I'd go to the black blue flake, the California craw, which is almost a cross between a dark black and a green pumpkin with some red and silver flake in it, I believe. But those colors were really key. That's the thing. I am a little bit of a believer in fine-tuning that color on your bite. But the Z-Man saved my butt many times this year as far as tournaments go. You know, the bite gets tough. I know at the Trail Championship up here in La Crosse, the Pro Tour Championship, my bite was the Ticklers, dragging it through rocks, and the color I used mostly up there was black blue flake. So number 2, and this is hard between number 1 and number 2. I'm going to put this bait at number 2, and I'm deciding this right now on the fly. Just because these last 2, ton of success, ton of big fish on these baits. Number 2 though here is the Shaky Head. This is important too, and I want to stress this, is the Shaky Head was one of my techniques. You know, on the podcast we talk about every year, beginning of the year, pick 2, maybe 3 techniques to work on and really dial in throughout the year. And then, you know, as you master those techniques, now you can put those in your toolbox, and you know, you're stacking up technique after technique after technique. I know some people feel like you should have 3 techniques, dial those in, and have them, you know, each 3 be different for different water columns, water types, things like that. But I'm a firm believer in using those 3 or 4, you know, solid techniques you have, but at the same time, adding to that 2 or 3 techniques throughout the year to just grow your toolbox. All it's going to do is give you more options when you're on the water and you're looking for fish. Maybe those 3 or 4 that you normally fish aren't working. Fish can get finicky. Obviously, we all know that. So Shaky Head was one that I really worked on this year, and it was mostly fishing it out deep. That was another thing that was like a goal for me in 2019, was getting off the shore, fishing deep structure. It took me out of my comfort zone, but it also opened up a lot of doors. I found a lot of bigger fish. I caught so many fish over 17 inches this year, which I know some guys have troubles doing. Definitely opened up the doors. The main Shaky Head I found, and I've tried many different Shaky Heads this year, was these Owner Ultra Head Shakies, and you know, they got the screw in for the plastics. I'm really looking forward to JigMasters is coming out with a Shaky Head that is similar to their flipping style jig head. With the Shaky Head, you really want something that's going to stand up. And the one worm that I found to be just absolutely a killer for me this year was the Zoom trick worm. and this is watermelon candy. I love this color. I also use black blue when I want to shorten up. These Yamamoto, you know, they got Daiwa marked on there, but green pumpkin, red flake. This was really good on sunny days. But this watermelon candy, man, it did wonders in all types of water. Crystal clear to just dirty, stained water. Once in a while I'd use a black and blue. But this is a longer worm, and this tail action on this trick worm is unbelievable. But what I was getting at is that when you have this worm on that shaky head, you want that head standing up so this tail is up here flailing. And I tell you what, you know, I usually use the 4/0 hook size. I've used 3/0 as well. That worm is so much longer than the hook, and I think sometimes fishermen have a mentality of longer bait, I should use a longer hook. Not necessarily the case. I can maybe count on one hand off the top of my head how many fish I missed by using that shorter hook on a shaky head. There is something about it when that fish sees that and they hit it. I mean, they hit it. And I know I did some live streams on our Facebook that you can go back and watch where I just slammed fish after fish after fish, and they were hard hitting that thing. And I don't think I missed a single fish on any of those live streams. It was every time I had a bite, I got a fish into the boat. And they got hooked good. I love these owner hooks, the owner shaky heads. They just stand up, they perform right. You know, the big misconception with a shaky head, I think, is guys think they need to cast it out there and just shake the rod. Not the concept, guys. I know Tactical Bassin did a really great video on shaky head fishing. Go back and watch that. Find it. It was a really good video, really instructional, and that's what helped me figure this technique out. You know, most of the time I'd cast it out, let it sink to the bottom, and then I'd just slow drag it in. Reel up, slow drag. Sometimes I'd throw a pop in there, or sometimes I'd just hop it on the bottom. You know, it depends. You know, I'd have days where that just slow drag, it would fire those fish up and just have them annihilate that worm. Whereas sometimes the slow drag wasn't working and you had to really pop that thing every once in a while, and those fish would fire up on it. So that was bait number 2. Bait number 1 for me was none other than a jig. I really expanded my jig fishing. I've always been a jig fisherman, but I really started, you know, testing out some different jigs this year, and I found 2 I really liked. Obviously, the one is the JigMasters casting jig. I don't know what it is about this head, but if you get this in the rocks, you can get it popped out. This thing stands up 99% of the time. You can just tell as you're working it through the water. But this watermelon candy jig, I tell you what, guys and gals, this jig right here caught me some monster fish. Many fish over 19 inches. I got my PB Smallie on this exact jig, 20 3/4 down on Table Rock Lake. Just unbelievable. But with a jig, oh, let me break into this jig as well. So when the bigger jigs weren't working, I did a lot of reading on finesse jigs, which was something I was really unfamiliar with this year. Shout out to Dusty Yacker. I saw this year he was fishing this Kayak. This is the Kayak Model 2 version 2.0 football jig. This thing is like tiny, guys. And this thing, when the big jig wasn't working, let me hold these up. When the big jig wasn't working, this tiny little guy, I caught, the first time I fished this, first cast, 19.5-inch largemouth bass here on my home lake. I don't know what it is, man. These little jigs, when that bite is finicky, it just works. So I've been talking to Cody from JigMasters about maybe doing a cross between these two, which I think will be really interesting. But here's the big thing. Oh, I got them right in front of me. So here's the big thing. You know, I talked about the TRD Craws. Perfect trailer, perfect size for this Kayak finesse football jig. I know some people will put the Kayak 2.8s on the back of these, which is a small little minnow type bait, which is just killer. Black, blue, and green pumpkin in the Kayak jig. Pretty much the only two colors I carry, you know, depending on water clarity and stuff like that. Usually makes up my mind on that. If you guys want to know more about like how I choose colors, you know, upon water clarity and things like that, leave a comment below. I'd love to talk about it with you guys and just kind of help you guys kind of figure that out. Going to the JigMasters. Trailers for this Rage Baby Craw and the Watermelon Candy. Killer option. Also their Rage Baby Menace. And then my all-time favorite trailer for any jig is a Berkeley Chigger Craw. These things are awesome. This is a 4-inch. So on a 4-inch with this JigMasters jig, I usually cut off that last segment on the Chigger Craw. And I'll kind of show you guys where that is. So on this Chigger Craw, there's segments here, and I'll cut this back chunk off. And it fits perfect, and it pairs up. Those claws are just dangling past the skirt. And some of my best fish this year, guys, came on that jig and Chigger Craw combo. You know, it all depends on the, you know, the bodies of water as far as colors, but there's a green pumpkin chartreuse. I believe it's called Summer Craw 2.0 by JigMasters. That was a hot jig for me. This watermelon candy, like I said, numerous good fish. And then obviously black and blue. Black and blue jig, you can never go wrong. When in doubt, get the jig out, as JigMasters likes to say. But those are my top 5 baits for 2019, guys. And like I said, some of these baits definitely saved my butt this year. Cashed me some checks, caught me some giant fish, whether I was in a tournament, pre-fishing, fun fishing, you name it. These baits are always on my boat and always my go-tos. I mean, these 5 baits are strong points for me. One thing I need to work more on is that chatterbait bite. I'll be honest, I don't throw it enough. I know a lot of guys do. It's just one of those things. But with that being said, guys, I hope you enjoyed this. If you guys have any questions, comments, leave them down below, and I'd be more than happy to answer them. So with that being said, guys, I hope you have a happy new year. Till next time, tight lines.